Okay, Doc, we can get started. Call the meeting 0836.
Well, welcome everyone. Thanks for being here. It's good to see everyone in person. Start with introductions. I guess I'll begin. Dr. Burley, EMS Medical Director.
Teresa Rios, EMS Director.
Philip Brown, Base Hospital, Chalk.
Rep Close for Chalk.
Cole Cliff, Mr. Vidal. Jeff Warner, Program Director with CalSTAR.
Ben Hitchcock, AMRCES Manager.
Rachel Newman, the MRCS Supervisor.
I'm Spencer Harnett. I'm the paramedic field rep for AMR.
Jamie Cobar, me.
David Thompson, base coordinator, SVH.
Good morning, Jesse Allard with the EMS Agency.
Justin Reyes, EMS Chief for Monterey County Regional.
Mike DeLeo, EMS Coordinator, CAL FIRE PE.
Mike Nettles, Cal Fire.
Good morning, Deborah Hopkins with the EMS Agency.
Blake Anderson, the EMS agency.
Steve Brooks, EMS Agency.
Deputy Fire Chief, CSET Fire Department. AMR Operations. Mike Esslinger with AMR.
Kimberly Hernandez, EMS Agency. Karina Moreno, EMS Agency.
And do we have anyone online there, Karina?
Yes, we do. And those that are online.
Devin Hague, Fort Lake Fire.
Nicholas Hall, Seaside Fire.
Good morning, everybody. Chris Montero with ESO.
Carlos Vega, Marina Fire Department.
Okay, excellent. Well, welcome again. Thank you for being here. That brings us to the next section, which is public comment, and any member of the public may address the subcommittee for a period of not to exceed 3 minutes. Are there any public comments? Okay, hearing none, we'll go ahead and move on to the next section, which is approval of past MAC meeting minutes from May 10th. Hopefully you had a chance to take a look at the minutes, and once you feel like you've had that opportunity, we'll go ahead and entertain a motion for approval of the minutes. Would anyone like to make a motion for approval?
I'll make a motion for approval.
Okay, thank you. Give a second.
I'll second.
Thank you. Okay, so we have a motion and we need a roll call vote or
Yes, sir. Let me run down real quick. Dr. Close.
Approved.
Philip.
Approved.
Jamie,
Okay, yes.
David. Spencer,
Yes.
Chief Reyes,
Yes.
Ben,
Yes.
and Jeff.
Yes.
And besides Dr. Cliff, did I miss anybody else? Okay, motion carries.
Thank you, Jesse. So there is no correspondence, which brings us to the next section, which is reports. And Teresa Reyes has an EMS agency update report for us.
Thank you, Dr. Burley. In your packets, there is a director's report with some of our current activities. We are beginning to look into some issues that were brought up to the EMS agency. I believe one was brought up at the last EMCC, which was the high frequency users of EMS. So the EMS agency is looking at that. We want to determine frequency. We want to look at, where in the county is happening, and then so that we can develop a strategy as far as, what in the way in which we can properly respond to that request. And then the other one came from one of our hospitals about regarding patients with weapons and or contraband. It was reported to us that hospitals are seeing an increase in the number of patients who come to the ER with contraband and or weapons. I had the opportunity to attend the Law Chiefs Association meeting, and I may be getting the name wrong because I'm so used to talking about the Fire Chiefs Association meeting. To open the discussion about this the situations, and they were very receptive. There was consensus among the group that they need to know about these instances. I came to the table with just a report from our stakeholders to the EMS agency, and what we all need is tangible information. So the best way that we can do that is if we can continue to encourage everybody to complete a UO whenever you find that situation, report it to us so that we can in turn report it to law enforcement. That is the best way for us to start to try to be able to do something about this. They say that, yeah, law enforcement should be patting down these individuals. They did say that there are places where they cannot check. So something might not, it's not 100% proof that patient does not hold anything with them. In any case, there are some questions about policies and stuff that we're going to be following up with the group. But again, it was very, the meeting was went well, I think. There seems to be willingness from them to help. They acknowledge that they should be checking these patients, and we will add this topic to a future agenda, hopefully by September, in terms of progress in course of action. And I'm happy to answer any questions on any of the other items on the report.
Teresa, any other questions for Teresa? Okay, that brings us to the MOAC activity report, and Jesse has something on that.
Okay, thanks, Doc. So there is a report in the agenda packet, but just a few highlights. The Public Health Department demobbed their Department of Operations Center. There's also kind of that memo in the attachment as well. That was, definitely predates me, but a lot of people, including those in this room, spent an incredible amount of time battling COVID, and so no easy feat. And the end of that, though, does bring kind of the end of our resource requesting link, and Deborah and I are working closely to kind of demob that. We have a few PPEs remaining, masks, tons of hand sanitizers, some face shields. And so these are all med health items. And I know you guys may have tons as well. The state doesn't want them back. We can't just throw them in the trash. So we're trying to be really thoughtful on that demob process and kind of release those in a tiered approach, giving you guys the first right or refusal as a med health partner and so on, before we kind of open those up to the general public and then ultimately dispose. But if you want hand sanitizer, I know someone who has a bunch, so please let me know.
Where are you in 2019?
Yeah, no kidding. And then also one other piece, and then Deborah may have just any other updates on Mohawk. The state has asked us to, as of tomorrow, start sending sit-stat reports on heat events. So I may be asking, or Deborah and I may be asking just some intel over the next few days, especially with Chief DeLeo. On kind of some of the fire aspect. I'm just getting some intel so we could pump it up to region 2. So any other Mohawk stuff or?
The only thing I might add is that planning with the Department of Emergency Management is starting for Car Week. So we'll be reaching out to some of the transport agencies to get some information on staffing and scheduling and special event planning. So we'll be putting together a medical plan to go out with all of that information.
Awesome.
So great.
Thanks, Jess.
Thanks.
The next item is patient offload times, and Kimberly has a report on that.
Morning. There was an APOD or ambulance patient offload time PowerPoint in your agenda packet. Just to quickly summarize, their APOD times have stayed relatively stable. There were some increases primarily at SBH and Natividad in May. But other than that, we still report to each of the hospitals, base hospital coordinators once a week with their ambulance patient offload times to discuss if there was any issues or concerns that they had or anything like that. So we continue to do that. Does anyone have any questions about APOP times?
That brings us to project updates, and the first item under project updates is the health data exchange implementation.
Yeah, I'll take that. I think the next are mine, so I'll just take that. Okay. The first one is HDE. We typically kind of give a verbal report of the status of each hospital. This meeting, we chose to put it together in a written staff report. With the end of COVID, this is a prime opportunity for us to get back and kind of put some focus into some of the projects that we've started a few years ago. This is one of those, HDE. And so to improve patient care, ensure compliance with state regulations and even local regulations, we have to have this health data exchange, which is bi-directional, meaning EMS providers and hospital providers are sharing data across the board. And so the status of each hospital is kind of included. The benefit of COVID is now we're able to kind of pivot and bring some other meetings back to life. And one of those is our EMS data system working group. This may have been a Fred Claridge meeting, definitely predates, I think, a lot of us in the EMS agency. So please be patient as we kind of grab the reins on some of these. But our desire is to bring that working group back together. We invited Chris Montera from ESO on the phone today. And we were really leaning on ESO's leadership to kind of bring some project management back into HDE so we can bring this effort and fully get in compliance. It's been a little too long and we can't blame COVID anymore. We've got to get to it. We have a plan to make some good headway. So I'm not sure if there's any other comments or if I.
We have Chris on the phone.
We do, yeah.
Okay, Chris, is there anything you wanted to add to HDE from your aspect?
No, I think you covered it well. I think, again, this is a part of a partnership that your EMS agencies and hospitals need to recognize. And we really believe in getting that data as well as the outcomes back to the agencies and the paramedics, as well as that great demographic information. So it's my hope that we continue to strive forward. The agency also shared with us a survey that went out, and we will make sure that we can address many of those. And I'm not sure if we want to have a separate meeting to do that, but I think some of those are germane to the HDE conversation. Some of them are also important to the discussions of how do I get data out of the system and things like that. So one step at a time, but I'm happy we're re-engaged in this process, and I think you'll be very pleased once you start to see the data outcome come back. Just a side note, when I ran a system in Colorado for over 14 years, once we implemented HDE within, we also had ESO, EHR at our organization, and it was powerful for our paramedics to really see the outcomes of the patients that they were seeing every day. So it's my goal that we make sure that you all can get that as well.
Thank you, Chris.
Just next step, stock on that. We're creating kind of a project management timeline. We are engaging some of the partners, to reach out to kind of understand really what it is that they need, especially from the transport. I know Will's over there probably chomping at the bit, loving this conversation because he's been bringing it up quite a bit. So, but more detailed plan to follow.
If I may, yeah, we really want to encourage participation. And we hope that the system understands, it's particularly the hospitals, because the bulk of the work is going to be between ESO and the hospitals to get this bi-directional connection. And it's not just a connection, but we really need to sit down and look at what are the needs of the system, because this is ultimately about improving patient care. So we want to make sure that we are in agreement and an understanding as to what is the information that needs to be shared to get to that point, that we are actually monitoring the system and improving patient care. The feedback to the field providers, to our first responders, to AMR paramedics and EMTs is critical to do that. It is something that they've asked us for some time. The agency has made efforts at different times, and for all of us, it was COVID. It's been staffing because of COVID, all of those things. But we are really hoping that now we can find the time to prioritize. The EMS agency will provide whatever support we need. We just heard from Chris and from ESO that they are also making a commitment. It is also a compliance concern. You know, we have to be in compliance with all the regulations, policies, ordinance, agreements, you know, designation agreements, all of those things are important. I've mentioned before that the EMS agency has been looking internally to make sure we've been combing through all of the requirements of us being the lead agency for the county. We take our job very, very seriously. We want to lead the agency in being compliance with all, work with everybody to make sure that we are all in compliance. So in that effort, we've been finding areas of deficiency, for lack of a better word, and we want to work with our stakeholders in that, in improving the system. And by improving the system, I think it just follows that we'll also be in compliance. Our hope is to be able to see that full implementation of the HDE in the very near future. I think that the work group will be critical so that that conversation among all of the stakeholders, the fire agencies, the ambulance provider, hospitals, and the EMS agency, so that we all understand and come to a consensus of as far as the information that needs to be shared, so that everybody's sharing equally, because that was the goal. This HDE project is not new. It's been on our agenda for some time. The fire agencies and ambulance provider will have, they have been bringing it up. So thank you for your understanding. We are showing the areas where we need to improve, again, you know, with mentioning some of the regs and stuff. And so our goal is to just get our system back up to speed and continue to improve. So thank you for your commitment. Thank you for your understanding and your patience.
Got a question, Jesse?
Yes, sir.
So the only information I've been getting back with patient outcomes is transport based. But when full implementation happens, are we going to get feedback for any time our paramedic that's engine based? Will we get patient outcomes from the fire side of it?
If you don't transport,
If we don't transport, I mean, it's because it's still meaningful.
absolutely. That I'm gonna have to defer to Chris on that because I don't know. But Chris, did you hear that question from Chief
Yep,
Chris?
absolutely. Absolutely, Chief. So a couple things. I need to look internally. We have recently released an update to HDE that will allow first responders to basically the first response agency to see that data as it comes back. I think I need to look at one of the dependencies might be, and this may be a California rule that we have to look at, that you would need to put in the, even though you transferred care to another unit, you may need to put in the destination hospital, so then that data flows back. But let me take that as a note internally to see what we need to do. But that's the goal of this, that you'll be able to see not only data from you as the initial paramedic engine on scene all the way through, but if that patient gets transferred to another center, the goal is to see that patient's journey all the way through. We just started implementing this this year so that we could see it all the way through that patient's journey, but I'm not quite sure where we are with the rollout of first response to ED. So let me take that back, but I will get you an answer.
Thank you.
One of the things about the work group is to be able to have that discussion, right? To identify what are the needs on all sides. We need to understand what is it that can be shared right now based on ESO, the ways ESO is set up, and then what is being shared currently, and then what are really the needs for the system, and then how start to work our path, you know, develop our path on how to get there, including whether or not, you know, how we engage ESO if it's something that is not being done, or if there's a different way that we can achieve that. But we want, at this point, we have an opportunity, excuse me, as Jesse said, right now that COVID has been winding down, that we have an opportunity to focus on this project and be more systematic about the way in which we have approached, that we approach it. We have not been able to approach it that way in the past. We want to do it now. We are hearing, we have heard the different needs, but now we really want to bring everybody together so that we all listen to each other and come together for the good of the patient and for the good of the system.
And then I get the second question is the work group that you're referring to, is that going to involve any of us or is that just the EMS agency central?
Yeah, I don't think we can do it without you.
Okay.
Like yeah, I mean, and honestly, it's exactly what Teresa said. You guys are gonna need to drive what it is that's working now, what isn't, so we can make it better. So you're in, not just your participation, but your leadership in it's gonna be pretty critical.
Thank you.
I think that's similar to when we implemented the EPCR. And I wasn't very close to that project at the time, but the EMS data work group, we just took the name of it because it existed before and it existed for a similar purpose. But that work group had representation from every sector of the system. So we want to do that because just as Jesse said, you know, we cannot work in a silo and try to guess what the needs of the system. We really need to hear from everybody in the system.
That includes Will too, so some workloads coming your way. Oh, okay. I need you as well.
Any other comments or questions regarding HTE?
I just have a question related to that. Are the current barriers for getting all the hospitals on board right now policies, or is it that there's IT issues and there's just incompatibility yet?
It's a combination. I think it's everything from staffing to just from the perspective of at least some of the hospitals is like the protection of the data. We've already covered those by developing the data governance policy to IT. You know, how is my system going to work with ESO system? I think Salinas Valley, they were the first to say, we can do it now, let's work on it, and they were able to successfully create that bi-directional connection. Natividad has done it, but my understanding is that it is not consistent right now. So there's the connection, but now we haven't gotten to that point that Chief Reyes says that, you know, they need meaningful information. CHOMP, I think we've addressed all of the data governance issues. Jesse has been working with their domain council, IT department pretty much, to now start to get that connection going. There was a questionnaire that CHOMP's domain council asked ESO to complete so that they can review what the needs are so they can get into implementation. Me Memorial, we know that there were some questions about what kind of resources this will require from them. So we're working with them to try to answer those questions and see how we can support that, because this is very important to us and we want to catch this window and really bring this to full implementation. The work group then is going to discuss what is it that needs to be shared so that we can come to a consensus and find a happy medium, because I'm sure that, you know, in many of the issues that we address is like we see it from such different perspectives sometimes that we can be pulled in different directions. So we got to find that common ground.
Any other questions or comments?
Great
Jesse.
segue, because another benefit of HTE would be to support something like an EMS buprenorphine project where Dr. Close could get better intel of the patients who come to her facility. So then she could QI the heck out of it and make a better mousetrap. You know, that's a huge, even though the EMS provider isn't seeing that benefit, the hospitals are. So there's, I think, many benefits on many different layers. The buprenorphine project, Dr. Close, did you want to start and speak to any? You had the Sun meeting yesterday, so.
The Sun meeting.
Or is today?
Yeah, so it's amazing. It's going really well. We have had 4 cases in some form or fashion. And what's really cool about it is we've learned a lot from each of them because they're so different, each of the cases and circumstances. So yeah, we've been able to get all the education done. I believe San Benito went live yesterday. Santa Cruz is later this week. We were obviously the first to launch, which was kind of exciting. And I didn't even get to tell you yet. San Luis Obispo has reached out to ask if they can follow our pathway. So it's just a great project, and I really feel like it's making some pretty great strides in a number of different ways, you know, helping the community, breaking down stigma, helping our EMS teammates really contribute to recovery, so they don't continuously see these patients in their addiction and not getting any services. So it's been pretty amazing. We're meeting with the Sun team today to follow up some of the cases and just to see what we can lessons learn all the way across, and then take it back for QI, as you were mentioning.
We did go to Contra Costa EMS's kind of similar work group, and they have a lot of strengths that we're trying to mirror. But one benefit that this project has is it's tri-county. And so I think that lends to a level of collaboration that we haven't seen with a project like this. And what else could that lead to? We also have a really strong Sun group. Every hospital all 7 hospitals in all 3 counties can accept these patients. And so what a huge benefit. In the other counties, they can only take them to 1 county facility, and they have like 1 or 2 Suns. So, and we have a whole team of Suns, and that linking that patient, if they get buprenorphine or not, is huge. So Ben and Rachel, you guys have been working a lot on some of the QI stuff and some of the cases. Anything to add or report?
Using the ESO Insights dashboard, we're able to create an active monitoring system where we can see basically a heat map based on information gleaned from PCRs, and it is a real-time link. So at any given moment, I wish I could show you guys the dashboard, but we worked with Jesse on that pretty thoroughly to make sure that that is live and active and current right now. And so there's some pretty detailed QI that can go into that. In addition to that, there's an active alert system. So when a patient receives bupe, the medic fills out a form, and that gets blasted to myself, the Sun group. Dr. Close gets it. There is a list of people. And so that means that the call can immediately be followed up by the Sun group, which is pretty nice. I think I'm pretty proud of that one.
Yeah. You're kind of geeking out, but I'm so proud. Like, I love it. I really appreciate you going through that and helping create that dashboard, Ben. That took a lot of time.
Unfortunately, we have technical difficulties with the projector.
Yeah.
Thanks again, Jesse, for all the hard work that you've done on this, you know, helping to shepherd this effort. And Dr. Close, again, thank you for your leadership and guidance and the passion that you bring to the project. We definitely appreciate it. Ben and Rachel, thank you for your efforts. And so it's been a success story so far, and we're pretty excited about the project, but also what's next, as Jesse says, in terms of like tri-county efforts and so forth. So it's pretty cool. So thank you.
Yeah, I've been bragging about this project. Of course, I don't take the credit, you know, where credit is due. But it makes me very happy to see this collaboration with the other counties in this effort to be part of the effort to combat the epidemic, in whatever way we can support that. We are happy to do so. And Jesse, you've been a rock star when it comes to working on this project. So
well, Deborah's the one who reminded me that our LoSAP application expires in December 2025. So I better get on that. I love that.
Well, you want to go on?
Yeah, there's a few nominations, and Karina, if you wouldn't mind pulling up. Okay, so what you can't see is this beautiful org chart that Teresa inspired that shows our primary and alternate committee members. I'll email it to the group so you can see it. It shows only 4 vacancies, and those are a couple fire, 1 behind Spencer, and then 1 behind Chief Watkins. So I'll work with each one of those groups, and I think we have been, we'll continue to work to fill those vacancies. But you know, kudos to you guys, and thank you for being here to make a quorum. It's pretty impressive to see everybody's name on the org chart. So that was a good idea, Teresa. So I hope you enjoy the visual.
It looks, you know,
So
it looks really.
I spent a lot of time on it. So.
Yeah, it looks great.
And then speaking of that, there are a few.
There's actually Google Glasses under your table. You can all put those on
that
and
would
just
be
view
so
it.
good.
Yeah.
I wish, I gotta use technology better. There are a few nominations going to EMCC. So we don't need a vote, even though we voted on this last time. They got double endorsed. But going to EMC today is Chief Watkins, the Director of Public Safety and Chief of Police with Carmel by the Sea Fire Department, or Police Department. I'm sorry if I butcher that in any way or if, okay. And then also Dr. Ian Steimer, crush that as well, with Salinas Valley Hospital is going to be an alternate. And then there are two that are just going for re-endorsement. They didn't quite get in the last timeline. That's Dr. Orchard and Dr. Click. So those four will be going to EMCC today, just leaving 4 vacancies. So thank you for your involvement.
Thanks, Jesse. So that next item is the 2024 policy protocol review cycle. And Steve, if you have something for that.
I do it. The staff report that's in your packet really gives the basic summary that the EMS agency has been working on 51 policies and protocols that we're moving forward in this review cycle. This is the point where we transition from EMS agency work in looking at the policies and protocols, seeing where we find some benefit for some changes. And we transition now to pushing these forward into the community for public comment. Before we move it into the public comment arena, I do want to express a great deal of appreciation for Dr. Burley, Deborah, and the EMS agency staff who have spent many, many hours looking at these policies and protocols, comparing them to other LEMSA policies and protocols, looking at best practices, everything we can do to really push forward the best product possible. And now it's time for our community, our EMS community, anyone in the public who wishes to address these. We will be releasing them for public comment soon, and we will have 8 weeks worth of public comment. In that time, we will also have a couple of open meetings, maybe by Zoom, here in person, to hear what people are thinking, to hear some verbal things, answer questions. We did this last couple cycles, and the interaction was really good for those who participated. There are a lot of questions we were able to answer, and it resulted in even better comments. So at this point, we'll be transitioning very soon, as soon as we put the final few pieces together in the policy and protocol update, and will be released for public 8 weeks of public comment. And if any questions on the process? Well, thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Our next report is from Deborah for modifications to the structure of the EMS agency's advisory committees.
Yeah, so good morning, everybody. So just as a reminder, and for those people who are new to the committees, our current structure places both the operations subcommittee and this group, the medical advisory subcommittee, as standing subcommittees of the EMCC. And sort of as included under those reporting to this group are the clinical quality improvement committees as well. So with that status as a standing subcommittee of the EMCC, it makes those groups subject to some additional requirements, including the Brown Act, probably most importantly, which puts in place the public meeting requirements, attendance in person, and some of those other more onerous requirements for publishing agendas and those sort of things. So it creates sort of a internal conflict with our quality improvement committees in particular, in that those are closed confidential group meetings, but are also subject to these public meeting requirements. So there's a little bit of a conflict there in just the structure. And then we've heard from the members, as COVID has come to an end, the challenges of coming back and meeting in person and needing to be in Salinas, for people who may be coming from hours away to attend these meetings. So hearing all of that, we've been working with our county council to find a way to restructure the committee groups so that MAC and Ops, and by extension, those QI committees, are no longer subject to those Brown Act requirements and no longer standing subcommittees of the EMCC. So the advice from county council is that we essentially dissolve everything other than EMCC as it currently stands. So we would dissolve MAC and Ops and remove that reporting structure and essentially reform those same committees as independent committees that would not be subject to the Brown Act. So we would create an operations working group and a medical advisory working group type committee They would be freestanding. We would add an additional report from our medical director to report back on MAC. Teresa would continue to report back on operations and provide that EMS agency report. That would free things up. So the QI committees are no longer public meetings technically, and these are no longer public meetings and subject to that Brown Act. So there's a staff memo in the packet that summarizes all of this information. There's also a revised copy of our policy 1020, which is our EMS advisory committee policy. So we have some, as standing committees of EMCC, currently bylaws are approved by the Board of Supervisors, and our policy over the years sort of drifted away from what had been approved by the board. So this would bring sort of bylaw content back into the policy, make it current, make it accurately reflect what we're doing now, and remove those requirements. So we're bringing it here to talk with you guys today, get your feedback on it, answer any questions that you may have. We're also bringing it to EMCC and Ops today, and then the intention is to bring it back to EMCC in September and ask for their endorsement at that time. So I'm happy to answer any questions. As I said, there's a copy of the staff report and that revised policy in your packet as well.
One thing that I can add is that as we search internally, one of the things that we found out, and actually Steve, our historian, that MAC and Ops were not always a direct report to EMCC. MAC had been an advisory committee to the medical director and the EMS director, and the Ops committee to the EMS director. I think it was during the time of my predecessor that that structure changed. Nothing would be lost in terms of things coming back to EMCC, because Dr. Burley and I will bring those reports. Right now, what we bring is the minutes from these meetings are part of the agenda packet for EMCC. We would not attach the agenda, the meeting minutes. It would be done as a report from Dr. Burley and me to EMCC. The work of the committees does not change. So I think the only thing is just one, removing the reporting structure, and then two, all of the requirements that come from the Brown Act committees.
I would also add too that we did do a survey of other LEMSAs throughout the state and found that the changes that we're proposing to make are more in line with what's standard at the other LEMSAs. So for us as well.
But we definitely don't want to propose this change to or bring it to MCC unless we know that there's agreement from the committee. We can bring it back for endorsement from this committee at the next meeting, or are there any questions? Does anybody have, does this change give anybody heartburn? No? Okay.
Thanks, Deborah. Okay, under new items for discussion, the first item is TQIC 2022 Trauma System of Care Educational Trend Document. Jesse has a report for that.
Sure, I'll take that. TQIC is another meeting that Deborah and I have been sharing. We've met a couple times this year, and one, I think, great thing that's come out of that meeting is some kind of pearls or recommendations from trends that we've been seeing, either with some of the ESO data or some of the feedback that we've gotten through UOs, et cetera. So we created this kind of educational document. Appreciate you guys looking at that and giving us some of your feedback before we sent that out. And the purpose of that was to get it to the field providers. So the really great discussions and feedback and pearls from some of the docs doesn't stop at the committees. It actually percolates its way down to the field where it needs to go. And so you may see some additional educational trends out of TQIP and maybe even other committees kind of along those lines with this idea. So that trend is included within the agenda packet.
Any questions? The next item is psychiatric evaluation 5150 transports, and Spencer Harnett has a discussion.
Thank you very much. So what I was hoping to get out of kind of discussing this would be finding a better way to handle our psychiatric transports and the evaluations. And more specifically, I'd be wanting to look at the self-committals. The self-committals really kind of hamstring our providers because they don't allow us to act under the behavioral health scope. They don't allow us to place patients in restraints that might become violent or aggressive towards us. They don't allow us to do sedation as is determined clinically necessary. This poses potential problems with being in a very confined space with an aggressive or violent person. It causes danger to us. We had several incidents earlier this year where our providers were assaulted by patients. And I would like to try to find a way to make that stop. So I'm not sure that there's one good, easy solution to this problem, but I would like to try to find some way to work better with our law enforcement partners to ensure that we're going to be safe in the back of our ambulance while we try to help these people out.
And typically there's a paramedic in the back,
Yes, sir.
so just one person.
Yes, sir. It's a one-to-one. We have our EMT up front that's driving usually. There's some type of, they can come back pretty quick sometimes, but things change very, very fast. And if we're driving on the highway doing 65 miles an hour, it's not always possible to stop right away. Sometimes you have to be on your own for a couple of minutes, and that can be a very long couple of minutes.
If I can add, I think our recommendation to our crews is always to try to restrain them, you know, and that makes it hard if they're not on a hold. They have to agree to it. But you know, and that's what I used to do with my patients is, you know, be kind about it, but hey, this is for everybody's safety here. But and Fire is fabulous about writing in with us anytime that we've asked for writers, that helps. But it's those patients that are very calm on scene and everything's okay. And as soon as those doors close and you get going, that surprise you. So I think that's where we're seeing the assaults happen and our medics being, and we've had some that have been out for a while too, that were like significantly injured. So, and like Spencer said, I don't know that there's one right solution, but
And it's not an isolated issue. There's roughly 1 million workplace violence acts every year, and about 45% of that takes place against healthcare workers. So it is a fairly significant problem and something we're concerned with. We still have employees that are still out from being assaulted earlier this year. So we're hoping, you know, working with the union, and we're hoping that there are things that this committee can discuss that might be a little more aggressive when it comes to keeping our providers safe.
This is a topic that I brought to the Law Chiefs Association. I keep thinking that I'm saying it wrong. I brought it up given the recent attacks and the concerns that were raised. They were also open to the conversation and looking to see how we can work together. So, you know, the conversation, the topic has been open. We would definitely want to make sure that whatever is within the EMS agency scope to be able to help put some measures that would help the crews. The safety is of utmost important to us as well. One of the things we were doing in response to the recent attacks and the concerns raised, we were looking at the restraint policy. Blake is trying to pull the document, but we were making some revisions. I think it was at this meeting, if I'm not mistaken, that the policy was discussed as far as some nuances in the language as to whether or not the restraining patient was allowed. But I don't want to go too much into it. It's not my area. The policy is not my area of expertise, so I'm going to let Blake and Dr. Burley expand on that.
Thanks, Teresa. And while Blake is working on pulling up the document, just sort of in philosophy, the EMS agency recognizes the risk to providers in the back of a unit with a patient who is potentially unpredictable and potentially violent. And so we will err on the side of protecting the provider, right? And, you know, from my standpoint, and the policy reflects this, that we give leniency to the EMS provider to place a patient in restraints if they feel that the patient is potentially violent or concerning, regardless of whether the patient is technically on a 5150. And so that helps to address patients who perhaps are under police custody or had an incident on the scene. It also just gives you the ability to use common sense and your own clinical judgment and set up a situation in which you feel safe. I don't believe you've had an opportunity to see the revisions to the policy yet, but we worked pretty hard and had a lot of discussion internally on this, and we look forward to getting feedback from our field providers as well on their thoughts in terms of the policy. So hopefully that will help to address some of the concerns. And if it might be better to have this conversation offline once you've had a chance to review the policy changes, and we can kind of work on it from there. So would this come out with the policy?
I don't believe so. So, but we will be releasing it here very shortly. So yeah, we have a draft completed here, and will be released here within the next few days.
Is it off cycle?
It is an off cycle.
I mean, is a more liberal restraint policy gonna fit? I mean, it sounds like a personnel issue too, right? You need more people in the back of the rig within these situations.
And that's one of the things we've also done is I've actually sat in with AMR on they're doing trainings. AMR had a internal town hall meeting about these events, kind of explaining what to do in these scenarios. And then we joined in basically vocalizing if there's a misinterpretation of the policy, this is what our expectations are. And this is, the guidelines. In the event that you feel like there's a danger to the patient, yourself, or the public, you have the absolute right to restrain. As long as, except for in like the circumstances where the patient is, completely alert and oriented, and it may be just an absolute danger to try to restrain that, you then just back away and get law enforcement involved. But the idea is with like the town hall and their internal trainings is to just identify for everybody what our expectations are for them and what they are allowed to do. So we can educate them, and also to write a policy that maybe reads a little better. So that way they're not getting misinterpreted of saying, well, it only looks like the policy, how it's worded, it looks like the policy states you can only restrain 5150 patients. Whereas this is like, no, you can restrain 5150 patients, you can restrain these patients and these patients. So that's the hope of what this policy write out has been. And we're hoping it's helpful for the crews. But you guys will be seeing this here very shortly.
I know many people brought that up to me when I went to the cruise to ask them for topics that they wanted brought up. And I think they'll be very excited to hear about.
Well, and it's probably gonna happen in a few, I think sooner than later, you're gonna get this policy. They're gonna go back and Spencer, freaking you're amazing. How did you do this? You're the best
Spencer
rep
moves
ever.
mountains.
Yeah, you watch.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
But I guess my only concern is, I mean, the timeframe, like 1, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, because what I don't want to see is something to happen to any of the transport agencies. Mike? I mean, here's my stance. If you need one of our guys, we'll send them. Mike,
You guys have always been.
you
wonderful
guys,
about that. Every
Cal
Friday.
Fire will do it.
Never.
Seaside, so, until we get because some people are really like, if it's not in writing, I don't want to get in trouble, so.
I think it
you
needs
have
a
our
bit of a
support.
culture shift too,
Yeah.
of everybody in the field too, and just getting in the habit of asking for that writer. But every fire department, in my experience, has been
Absolutely
wonderful.
amazing.
Yeah, I've even had them, I know I've had firefighters just hop in, like, I'm going with you.
I can say rather definitively that we have never received a report of any fire personnel refusing to write
And we
in for
appreciate
that.
that. Yeah. So I think for our crews too, just getting in the habit of always asking for that as well.
I guess this beckons the call. If you look at other systems around the state that have behavioral health units, are we looking at that in the next RFP?
We are actively looking at the numerous issues that we have with 51.
Sorry, Mike, I'm not trying to add anything to you guys, but
No, I mean, interesting, that was the comment that I was gonna make, sort of, feeds right into the same thing. I mean, we recognize that it's really a complex issue. And, one of the things that I wanted to point out is that, they did some great training, and I know that EMS was also involved with that. But we are emphasizing to our crews that, there has to be a heightened awareness, and also encourage them not to transport patients that have any remote sense of risk with that, because we've had so many incidents. The other thing I was going to add, I don't want to speak out of school. I know it's a really complex issue, and I know that there's a lot of different branches that come off this. But I would like to ask, I think at some point, and to kind of piggyback onto this, is that we really do have an issue with how we're transporting behavioral health patients. So I think that it's beyond just the scene calls that we have for 5150s and self-committals. I think the long distance transports, I think it's something that, it's historically been put on us as it's a provider issue, and how you guys transport patients to San Diego and some of these long distance areas become our problem. But I have to tell you that, it's all of our problem. And I think that we really have to take a look at it. When we transport patients for, 6 hours in the back of an ambulance, and we don't have appropriate means to take them into a bathroom, to feed them, it becomes really complex. We have, sometimes just male crew members with female patients that have to go to the bathroom. So we pull over, go to a public restroom, into a commercial facility where we can't supervise them. There's a whole list of issues, and it's a lot different than in a hospital setting. So I do recognize that this is a very complex issue, and probably nothing that we can solve, in any immediate time frame. But I do think it's something that at some point we all have to work together to figure out a better means to care for these patients.
Thank you. And again, we're aware of the issues, and we look forward to finding solutions. We know it's complicated.
Yeah, it is.
It's not an easy fix, but we're aware that there needs to be. Thank you both for bringing that up, and you should be receiving our new restraint policy shortly.
Thanks for the invite to the town hall. That was helpful for us to be a part of that. So thanks.
And also in conjunction with this, there was also a protocol that we did a slight alteration, at least it was for the chemical sedation as well. So it allows for IM as a secondary dose. So there was, Chief Ray has brought that up, so that will be coming out with this as well.
I just wanted to add from the ops side, like with Ben and Rachel and the issues that we had, we did have 4 major assaults. One person's still out of one. So from our side of the house, and in conjunction with the policy changes, you've been educating our crew members on what they can do. And of course, asking for fire help. What Dr. Green said is correct. It does tend to be at times a personnel issue, getting more resources in as soon as possible. So Ben and Rachel and our union and all of our partners have been great about that, sort of ensuring that the crew members know the tools that they have currently, when they can stop the call to then ask for more resources to come in. So that's what we're doing on our side.
How many of these voluntary transports do we have? I mean, would it be a huge burden to just say that the policy is that there's an additional person in the back of the ambulance for each one, because it wouldn't be too much of a burden, or would it cause some serious staffing issues with the fire or the other agencies if there was always a second person in the back of the ambulance with the psychiatric transports?
So for a lot of these transports, fire isn't even requested. It's just a law enforcement agency requesting an ambulance for transport.
That's what they radio in as a 5150 transport. The crew arrives on scene, and then they're told there's no form that this is a voluntary transport.
Yeah, we don't. The 5150 calls that if we're not part of the transport aspect on our district, we don't even know they're happening. So.
And they don't necessarily need to go by ambulance per se, which is another conversation.
Unless there's a very clear medical need, like a bleed
Yeah,
or
that's a good
taking
point.
some type of medication or pill or overdose.
15 years ago, they used to take their own.
If and it's a problem in every county, not just this.
Yeah.
If Spencer, this policy came out and it was kind of clarified the ability and empowered you to restrain in the scenario that you described where law enforcement called you on a non-5150 who you probably should, does that kind of and you have one person in the back, does that alleviate some?
That would make a pretty significant difference, actually, because I think most crews are viewing it as, unless they have the 5150 form in their hand, they're not allowed to restrain patients.
And actually, under the old policy, because I looked at the language there, and, you know, of course, part of it is a matter of interpretation, right? Sometimes when you're explaining, when you write something down, you know what you're trying to say, but the person reading it can't get into your head. And, but, you know, the language was there to allow paramedics to restrain patients who are not necessarily on a 5150. And we kind of discussed that in our meeting with AMR, but it was requested that we change the language and adjust it to make it clearer. And we definitely saw how, you know, better clarity on this issue, it was key to revising the policy. So it's sort of always been our intention to allow that to happen. And hopefully this makes it clear.
But these 3 assaults were these 5150 calls?
They were all or self-committal calls where we
Okay.
were called in by PD with no 5150. So I just wanted to add that too. That's a major component here that I think should be.
I mean, do we think it's okay to have you know, especially a big patient who's agitated and 4-point restraints, only have one person in the back of the ambulance with them? That doesn't sound like I mean, because I had this happen to me where the paramedic gives me a report and it's, you know, a female and weighs 100 pounds. And then, you know, I go in the room and maybe the person isn't even on 5150, they're just like high on meth and tweaking. And, you know, I'm like, I don't feel safe in here. You know, I'm in the hospital with tons of people around me, you know, right? So, I mean, I think a very liberal policy for having extra people in the back is probably the best safety insurance, you know?
Yeah, and you know, I guess the challenge is always when you write a policy saying there shall be.
Right.
Then sometimes it backfires and you end up tying EMS hands.
Right.
Sort of don't need it, so.
Right, but any language, I think, to support extra people.
Yeah.
Is.
Yeah, and there are cases in which, you know, EMS is called to the scene by PD and the medic may not feel comfortable transporting that patient. And again, you know, we encourage them to have a conversation with the police officer and say, would you mind riding with us in the back of the ambulance? I'm 92 pounds, he's 205, and he's gonna kick my butt if he gets out.
Right, exactly.
And I think, you know, police are pretty responsive to that. They understand that they want to create a safe situation. And so, you know, again, better to have those discussions at the scene and create a safe space for the provider. And I think in general, police are pretty receptive to that as well. So,
And that aligns with the training we just had our annual training, and that aligns we had an entire combative patient management program that we deployed. And that was one of the overriding themes was the ambulance does not move until your safety concerns are addressed.
Yeah.
And those conversations take place on scene, contact the supervisor.
so much of like safety is like sizing the situation up beforehand rather than responding to it once things get out of control.
I can tell you, my officers in Carmel have no issues jumping in the back of the ambulance, as long as it's going to Chong. If it goes to Salinas, I've only got 2 officers. So if I lose one, I gotta call somebody in before we send that bus. So self-committals, I mean, we handcuff people just for safety reasons. But as soon as they get in the bus, you know, it's what your policy says. But on a 5150, I have no problem sending an officer. Absolutely. Just for that safety element, we can keep them handcuffed in the back, or you can restrain them. It's how you want to do it, but we'll go with it.
Yeah, we appreciate that.
One of the questions that I asked at the meeting with the law enforcement is I wonder if it would be helpful as AMR is doing training with paramedics and EMTs, maybe do some, or as we put out the training on the relations to the policy, that we do something jointly with law enforcement, so they can be there, they they can hear directly from law enforcement, ask questions. They were open to it. So that's something to think about. Like I said, they were very receptive, very understanding. And so I want to make sure that we follow through with some of these things and work together.
Fantastic.
We could leave this on the agenda and for next September, and that'll give us opportunity to read the policy and bring back any additional thoughts, if you'd like.
Will we have the new version of the policy by then?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. You expect days.
It will be out this week.
Yes.
Awesome. All right, well, thank you again for bringing this to our attention and good discussion. We'll go ahead and move on to the next item on the agenda, which is EMS System Quality Improvement Program and CQI tag. And Blake, I believe that's yours.
So I'll be somewhat quick on this. Some of the topics were already addressed earlier, but we were unable to hold our semi-QI committee on June 6th, but we were able to hold our stroke QI on June 28th. During that meeting, we were able to present some important milestones in stroke care and provide a larger picture of what a patient-centered stroke system looks like. We were also, during that meeting, able to address things such as scene times, alert notifications, door to CT benchmarks, and just overall recommendations for the system. Along with that, we had our T-Quick meeting, which Jesse had already addressed a bit. And then on June 28th, we had our CQI tag meeting. During that time, we did a review of the 23 policy and protocol review cycle, where we addressed things like the patient restraints, QI plans, and the buprenorphine project. Outside of that, we also discussed one of our regular data reports that we present at the meeting is ketamine administration and what documentation looks like, and what kind of how patients respond to ketamine. During that report, we highlighted one of the, actually a kind of a positive is we're seeing more and more documentation on things like side effects that are coming along with ketamine, because prior you would hear through the grapevine or like, you know, that, oh, I had a bad experience because I gave ketamine and it caused someone nausea and stuff, but you don't see that documented. Now people are starting to report that. They're giving a much rounded report on what happens when someone gives ketamine. So that's been very helpful for us to establish the effectiveness of ketamine, and it's just good documentation procedure. So we're glad to see that improving, and alongside that, we discussed our health data exchange and where we were at with. Outside of that, the only other thing for our CQI tag is we don't have any continuing education pieces at this time, but we will let you guys all know if anything comes up. So that is the report. Any questions?
Thanks, Blake.
Thank you.
Brings us to future agenda items. Any items that the committee would like to see on future agenda for MAC?
So the hospital interfacility transport stuff, in conjunction with RFP, I think we need to figure out a way to at least talk about, because I think we're just gonna be doing more and more transfers of one type or another. And I think it's just becoming more and more of an issue. So I think we need to spend a little bit of energy and effort trying to address that. And I don't know how to work that with in conjunction with RFP and all that stuff. I want to put that on your guys' radar.
We're talking more about out of county transfers or within the county?
All of the above. It's just, right? I mean, I don't know what your guys' experience is. I know actually, because I've had patients helicoptered from you for MRCPs. You know, that there's obviously some problems there too, right? But I just hear from everyone that, you know, and I see how long it takes the transfers to get to our facility, you know, 12 hours and stuff. You know, and we had an unfortunate incident where a delay led to, you know, which we'll be sending some stuff out about, but a bad outcome.
But we have been in communication with the hospitals to discuss,
Yeah.
particularly behavioral health, because it is
Yeah.
its own.
No, behavioral health is definitely a huge part of it, but so is just routine
Right.
BLS and ALS transfers in and out of county. And I don't know, you know, I don't know if the plan is we're still gonna have an exclusive, ambulance contract where that's gonna be part of it and how that's all gonna work, but I don't, but I think it's just gonna get worse, right? And over the next 5 years, so I don't know what, but I think we need to look at it because, with the amount of lost, room time and increasing offload times, EMS system impacts, I think it's just going up and up and up. I mean, I don't know. Do the other hospitals have a similar experience that this is becoming a bigger and bigger problem?
Yeah, yesterday we had 50% of our rooms locked up for transfers.
Yeah,
They
there
were
we
all
go. Right.
critical. They were all in their own way critical patients. So
Right.
50% of our rooms. I mean, we're tiny, the 6-bed ER, but
Yeah.
I mean,
right.
and we're South County, and so it's
Right.
it's really, our hands are tied, so we use the helicopter a lot.
Right, which that's another thing, because I've, the safety stuff for that, right? I mean, I know we haven't had any incidents, but
Yeah, so
Yeah.
like I said, we've been in communication with the hospitals, trying to gather information, sort of a mini assessment, but we also released a SWOT analysis, hoping to be able to gain more information from the entire system. We didn't get a lot of feedback in that area.
All right.
But the conversations are ongoing.
all right.
And if I could just reemphasize, if you do have a critical patient though, or, a high acuity patient, I think that our CCT resources are very limited. But certainly, we would not put a patient on hold that's really sick.
Well, yeah, I mean, but that's happened, right?
Do you have
I mean, right, I mean, we had, we had patients with subarachnoid hemorrhage that wouldn't fit in a helicopter, right? I mean, it's a tough situation, but, right?
You mentioned a 12-hour delay. Do you have a specific incident or is that just anecdotal?
Oh, no, we definitely had, 12, you guys have had, what's your longest delay for out of county transfer waiting for ambulance?
For a critical patient?
No, that's not critical, yeah, not critical.
And
I mean, this is like 4 or 6 hours.
Whether or not it's critical.
Right. So we run this problem, right? So that where the CCT rig's not available, right? And then we can't use a helicopter because either weather or patient size. And then, and so then it runs into a big problem, right? So the CalSTAR team didn't want to go in an ambulance because it would have tied up the CalSTAR team for, 4 or 5 hours or whatever, right? So, right. And so then, we have a patient that we can't do a procedure on who's, slowly dying. It's not a great situation to be in, it's not like anyone's fault. I mean, it's just the way that, system problem, but it's just a system problem that needs to be, I think, addressed, because I think it's become a bigger and bigger issue. I mean, because care is getting more specialized, right? Hospital capacity is going down. This is our world, I think, and it's not, I just, want to bring it to people because, I think it's just a big systems problem. So, anyway.
Yeah, and we've had conversations about CCT, and I don't remember when. I think it was Jeremy from Salinas Valley. reached out to us. I mean, the reality of the CCT program is that is one nurse on call 24/7.
Yep.
So if that one nurse is on a transfer and another one comes in, there's no way to split that person into two.
Right. No, right. No, for
But
sure.
one of the things that we did do in agreement with all the 4 hospitals is if the hospital had the ability to send a nurse in the ambulance so that that patient could be then taken to the hospital, that other facility where the patient needs to go, that would be an option. It was an agreement reached among all the hospitals. It really hasn't been utilized. Kimberly did a study of when it was first brought up of the delays in the CCT. And in terms of delays of agreed upon time, there really wasn't a delay of the ambulance coming to the hospital. I think the problem is that there's one nurse.
Right.
24/7.
Right.
We are internally exploring the idea of a paramedic CCT
Okay.
program. As with everything, we have to look at this on a 360. But we've asked the hospitals, actually we brought it up as we were discussing transports. The possibility of that, of course, we have to have more conversations, not just with the hospitals, but it affects the providers. So that's one of the things that we are exploring internally. We know the need is there. As Jesse said, with the other transport, it's not just for Monterey County, it is actually everywhere.
Yeah.
CCT is a problem. There have been other jurisdictions, they have a bigger problem Just like, we've been actually very fortunate, because I look at different areas, APOT, CCT, and we're actually in much better shape than some other counties that just cannot staff their CCT. That the APOT times are, crazy hours, the standard. But yes, thank you for bringing it up, Dr. Greenson. I think, but I want to make sure that I say at this, with this group, that we are working on those things. As Michael said, each of these issues that are topics that we are discussing is very complex. And we have to peel the onion and cry a lot in the process. But we are working on these issues. And we look at what other systems are doing. We're trying to find best practices, not just within California, but outside, and trying to get creative. I mean, we're trying to see if there are ways to partner with other counties in addressing this issue.
Yeah, it would seem like pooling some CCT resources would be an opportunity there between the 3 counties, right? I mean, I don't know if that's been done or talked about. I know when I talk to the AMR dispatch people, that they say they can't pull an ambulance from out of county or something like that, but I don't know if there's a way to, because that would be that would seem like a better for AMR, because you'd have higher utilizations and all that kind of stuff, right? And it
Those
might
are
be a
the things that we're
win-win.
Exploring, I mean, to borrow Dr. Burley's words, is that we're trying to put more tools in the toolbox. I think sometimes we focus on finding the solution to a problem. And for many of the situations that we have in our county, there's no one solution. So we gotta find a combination. And as a system, I think we really need to be open. Sometimes change is difficult to effect because we get used to the things, the way that we're doing things. But we gotta try, sometimes we gotta try. If it doesn't work, we change it, we fine tune it, we scrap it, we try something else. But to me, it's just, being willing to do something different, a combination of things. I think that's really what it's going to take for our system, is just to look at a combination of things that we can implement.
Ultimately, getting that patient out of your hospital into the right place is good for the patient. It's good for you. It's good for the system. So I think we're all aligned that we want this to happen. We're not pushing back and saying it doesn't need to happen. It's definitely
right. Well, and the
efficiency is critical.
The transport's going to happen, right? I mean, it's going to be a resource, but if we do it up front, it would save hospital resources and patients.
And the longer that patient sits in your bed, the less beds you have, and the slower it takes, and more the APOT times go up.
Right.
Then the system starts.
Right. And we're not quite like me, but I mean, we're a 15-bed ER trying to see 60,000 patients a year. It's a task.
Yeah.
Just real quick, sorry. The new RFP, is there any mandation of BLS units? Because that's where, at least I, don't get mad at me, but that's where I see a breakdown, is because you have a CCT nurse meeting with an ALS unit, and then sometimes they go, oh, that one got a call. Okay, let's get another one. Oh, because you're always going to be fighting a 911 call. So the 911 call is always going to go before a transfer. But even though the transfer might even be sicker than that 911 call, you're always going to be fighting them. But if you had a built-in BLS dedicated, whatever dedicated unit that they took away 2008 or so, maybe around 2008, when they came back from West Med to AMR and they removed the interfacility transfer units. We're always going to be fighting the ALS 911 call, that transfer.
I just want to put on that they did add in one of the amendments that if it is a priority or like a code 3 transfer, that they cannot be diverted to a 911 call.
Yeah.
So just so you know that they can't be.
There's a lot of doctors who don't like to just, they might need surgery. They might, okay.
Well, I'm just saying for the really critical patients.
There's also a lot of doctors that are comfortable with that, and it ends up diverting resources, an inappropriate resource to a BLS patient that could wait, which does happen frequently.
You mean on the hospital side?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, they just helicopter them out most of the time if they're 90, but they're code 3 now.
Things like a shared transport, like a 4-bed bus or something that goes daily up. North.
Just around,
Gurney down. I'll just like a
Share, just shuttle, IFT shuttle bus. That could be actually a good idea.
I like
I
it.
like ideas back there.
We have a lot of like pediatric mental health patients or things, people that aren't that acute, but they tie up an ambulance for 6 hours to go up to like north side of the bay and back. They tie up a whole crew, but they just need transport. Might be a way to try to get some of those patients transported out of the county without tying up our resources that are supposed to stay within.
And I'll acknowledge that, you know, it is such a complex issue. And I will say, and I know that, you know, all of these concerns are very real, but we really do have it better than a lot of my other counties anyways. You know, the fact that we have dedicated resources. You know, the BLS unit, it's a great idea, but it's a very similar issue to CCT. When you have, you know, if the BLS units are, you know, tied up on calls and you're only using BLS for those types of calls too, and not sharing resources, that creates a similar issue. You know, and also, you know, there's a duplication of those resources that when you start utilizing, you know, adding BLS units in the system with ALS and with CCT, when you have even though that when you have critical need, you need that resource right away. You know, the reality is it's a very low volume, very expensive type of service to provide. We have, I mean, not for good, we have a great staffing model here, which in other areas, it's also just with the nursing shortage, it's also very difficult to staff. And I think that it is worth taking a look at, but just know that there's so many moving pieces, especially on the CCT side, when you have, you know, anywhere from 12 to 25 calls, you know, less than a call a day. And when you only have that one resource, you know, can you afford to put two resources in the system, but at the same time, you know, it compounds the problem. So there's just so many moving pieces, and I don't think it's anything that we can solve right away, but we are aware. And I will say that from my perspective, you know, really to give a lot of kudos to the EMS agency is that some of the changes in the last 2 years, you know, I've been in the county for over 20 years now, have been some of the most important improvements I've ever seen in the company. So I think that there's been some huge improvements in the system, but there's still a lot of room of issues that we're probably gonna have to take a look at, figure out, you know, if there's different ways that we can solve it. One thing I would also like to ask is certainly, you know, when problem calls do come up where you see that there was a negative outcome with the patient, we should probably just take a look at those anyways to see if there's anything we could have done differently. Just to see if we could have, you know, better utilized our resources or figured out a way that we could move that patient quicker, and we're always open to do it. So I appreciate it, but it is a really complex issue, and for what it's worth, just to make a statement, we are doing 20 times better than some of the other our adjacent counties and other areas because they don't have a requirement for CPT, which makes them finding resources to bring down. Sometimes they just don't have those resources at all. The fact that we're obligated to have that resource here, I think that, you know, make it for the patient. It's been a great place for the nurses. I think they like it too. So we haven't really had the same staffing issues they've had in other areas, keeping those resources staffed.
I wanted to just go back to the topic of the delays. And Kimberly, can I put you on the spot?
Sure.
Could you talk about the process that we implemented so that
Oh,
if
the
there's a delay
transfer-
with the
The
transfers?
transfer delays, yes. So let me come up here, so. Okay.
Just to remind the group, and especially, we probably need to periodically remind the hospitals that that is there. We felt that one of the things is education and information about the system, that the condition of the system was critical to understand what's going on and why. Sometimes there will be delays, but we wanted to monitor. So go ahead. Kimberly.
So AMR dispatch, anytime there's a transfer delay, like if the hospital calls, we need a transfer and they're gonna have to give an ETA of over 6 hours, they notify us so that we can keep track of how often this is happening. But also I wanna point out that if you have a critical patient, specifically Dr. Greenson, if you said there was a negative outcome, if you have a critical patient that needs to go, like just because you get an ETA from the dispatcher, if you feel like this patient really needs to go, is there anything else that can be done? Feel free to talk to the dispatcher and say, can I get a call from your field supervisor? So that maybe the field supervisor who's looking at the whole system can try and maybe arrange or figure out a better way for that patient to move. So don't feel like the hospital's like the first answer you get from the dispatcher is that's it. So we talked about that because of the transfer delay. So we are being notified of any transfer delay over 6 hours. If you feel that there's an extreme delay, submit an unusual occurrence for our website, so we can look into it, like Mike said. Maybe something else could have been done. We can look at what was going on in the system, because not everything is, you know, as it always should be, or the first answer you get is not what is going to be the end all be all. So please feel free to reach out to their supervisor or get a phone call from them, because they might be able to help arrange something for those patients. And also, if you have a critical patient and it absolutely needs to go, request a code 3 transfer, not for patients that you just need them to move and they're not really critical patients, because Ben already talked about that. But ask for a code 3 transfer, because those ambulances cannot be diverted to a 911 call. So they're coming as fast as they can. Even if there's only 3 ambulances left in the system, you're getting one for that patient. So just know that. Any questions on that?
Just from AMR, from the county perspective, is 6 hours considered a reasonable amount of time to transport a patient or facility? Or is that just what you draw the line as a delay? I think from our perspective, that seems like a really long time.
It is a really long time. But there's
What's the goal time, I guess?
Okay, so you'd have to go back to the amendment. So there, and it's also about schedule, because sometimes we talk about ER and there's transfers also coming not out of the ER, right? There's coming out of beds, they're scheduled. So like sometimes ER doctors are like, there are no scheduled transfers, all these transfers you can believe right now, but other parts of the hospital. So it's hard to say like, well, you're giving a 4-hour ETA because they scheduled that. So we had to pick a time that like, where's like, okay, this is like a pretty big delay, right? Because otherwise we're going to be getting pages over there's 2-hour delay, there was this, and we have no idea what's going on. But 6 hours seems like a pretty long time. If you feel like you had to wait 3 hours for a patient that really needed to move, you can submit a UO so we can look into it. But again, if it's a really critical patient that needs to move now, request a code 3 transfer.
Or to speak with the
supervisor. If it's like kind of in that gray area where you're like, okay, I don't really need a code 3 transfer, but I really need to move this patient before 3 hours, ask to speak to the supervisor so they can maybe like, you know, maybe they're going to be able to prioritize the transfers or do something different to help get that patient moved.
Right, I just wanted to make sure, I didn't know what, like on our end, what our expectations are as far as reasonable amount of time versus the transporting agency, what they, you know, what their expectation for a delay versus like an expected amount of time was, but there's not a set point over 6
So like for a
hours.
code 3 transfer, there's a set specific time, but then there's a scheduled transfer where that's an agreed upon pickup time. So we had to kind of, you know, the code 3 transfers, again, 3 ambulances left, you're getting one. They might be coming from a half an hour away because that's the last, you know, the closest one to your hospital, but you're going to get it. So there's a time, response time requirement for those. And I think for green, it's 60 minutes, which Natividad is in the green zone. So that's where we had to pick the 6 hours, because also that was coming up with a lot of behavioral health transports that they were getting pushed back because maybe a patient that comes in that's a medical critical patient, now the 5150 transport gets pushed back. So those like kind of seeing how often they're getting pushed back, how far they're getting pushed back, so we could get alerted to see like, well, how often is this happening? So that has been, we had spoken to Dr. Burke and talked to them a lot about the transfer delays because of the 5150 transports. So, but again, those are kind of the options to kind of help. And if you have a question, ask the field supervisor. And if that doesn't, you feel like you still need help, you can ask to speak to the duty officer.
And just to clarify that the 6 hour was just something for us to determine the point at which we should be notified. Not that we're saying 6 hours is it's acceptable. There are reporting requirements, as Kimberly said, there are reporting requirements within the contract. So if it exceeds that, please do notify us. We can look into it. But we don't want to tie up AMR notifying us each time because that it varies so much. But we wanted to be able to monitor. We wanted to establish some parameters to that and to be able to monitor. It seems to be working. One of the things that I realized is that as we were having these conversations, and that's actually was with Dr. Burke, that we realized we need to do more education because you know, with the critical transfers, they didn't realize some of the doctors we talked to, they didn't realize that they could escalate that transport. There was a specific patient that was described as, you know, could have lost his eye and they were waiting for an ambulance. And I said, well, you could have escalated that. And they really didn't know that. So that education, the more essential information is been helpful.
Any other questions?
wanted to reiterate the request for a seat phone call is that seat phone call, I get the phone call. We look at the system together. And in addition to the immediate response, there is a time frame associated with that, but we look at that. Saying this person is that ill, they need to be sent. That supervisor phone call that incorporates myself.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kimberly. Any other items for future agenda items? And any announcements or anything for good of the order? Okay, well, thank you all. The next meeting date is going to be on September 13th at 8:30. So I look forward to seeing you all then, and we will go ahead and adjourn.